Remember when a man torched his entire career by handing one honest document to everyone he worked with, he only kept one client who never stopped screaming, and the whole thing somehow turned into the love story of 1996? Well, that was Jerry Maguire. Released by TriStar in 1996, it starred Tom Cruise as a sports agent whose entire life gets torched by one late-night manifesto and a sudden urge to be emotionally honest. Renée Zellweger played Dorothy Bird, the woman who follows him right after his career explodes, and Cuba Gooding Jr. plays Rod Tidwell, the only client who stays, mostly by yelling until the walls give up. And today we're going to count down 15 weird facts about Jerry Maguire that prove that this movie was just as messy, funny, human, and weirdly intense behind the scenes as Jerry's Midnight Meltdown. And stick around for number one, because the film that told us money wasn't everything ended up in about a $10 million fight over a sneaker commercial. But before we start, hit like and subscribe to Remember When for more deep dives into the movies and shows that we grew up quoting way too much. It helps YouTube find more people who quote this stuff like it's their personality. All right, let's go find our Quan. Our what? Our Quan. Number 15, 14,000 VHS tapes and a desert pyramid. Someone is building a pyramid out of Jerry Maguire VHS tapes in the California desert.
So this is the main chamber. Mm-hmm. My only concern was the floor wasn't jerried, too.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
The group behind it is the video art collective Everything is Terrible, and they've been hoarding copies of this movie since 2008. In 2017, they opened a pop-up video store in Los Angeles, stocked floor to ceiling with nothing but Jerry Maguire. You couldn't rent it, you couldn't buy it, you could only stand inside a room full of Tom Cruise on VHS and quietly reconsider your afternoon. The collective calls the whole thing the stupidest incarnation of the American dream, and they've sworn to keep going until the pyramid exists or they don't, which is genuinely the right energy for a tribute to a film about a man who mails his feelings to an entire company and then works out the logistics later. The strange part is that the supply makes sense. Jerry Maguire was a monster VHS seller in the late 90s, the kind of tape that landed in like every house, and then every thrift store and donation bin once DVD took over. By the time Everything is Terrible came looking, these things were practically breeding in the wild. They're past 14,000 copies and still counting. All of it mailed in by strangers, and nobody involved appears to have consulted a storage professional before committing. And director Cameron Crowe eventually donated his own signed copy to the pile, which feels right. If strangers are building a desert shrine to your movie out of dead media, come on, you can at least spare a brick. Number 14, Tom Hanks was supposed to be Jerry Maguire. Cameron Crowe spent nearly 4 years writing the script for Tom Hanks. The entire psychological build of the character, the midlife moral collapse, the desperate charm, the slow, painful recovery, that was shaped around the way that Hanks moves through a role. 4 years is a long time, though. Long enough for Hanks to win 2 Best Actor Oscars in a row, and then drift toward directing, and crept up on 40 while the character stayed 35. The math? It stopped working. Hanks also wasn't sold on the romance. He didn't buy the marriage, and figured that without a believable one, the movie was just a story about a guy sleeping with a coworker. So he passed. Then, Tom Cruise read the script. According to Crowe, Cruise moved fast and came in hot. He insisted on reading the whole thing aloud to Crowe and producer James L. Brooks just to prove that he was the right guy. Which, look, for a movie star at that level, that's not exactly standard behavior. Hanks would have given us a decent man, I'm sure, trying not to lose himself, but Cruise gave us this golden boy that was watching everything collapse at once and not quite believing the altitude of it. Somewhere out there is a timeline where Tom Hanks screams, "Show me the money!" into a phone, and we don't get to live in it. Oh well. Number 13, the director who misread his own catchphrase. Now, Cameron Crowe was convinced that audiences would walk out of the theater repeating, "The Quan." That was Rod Tidwell's homemade philosophy. Love, respect, community, money, all crammed into one made-up word. Crowe imagined Tidwell had gotten jealous of Dennis Rodman, who used to toss out invented pseudo-French words like inspirato mid-interview with total conviction, and figured a guy like Rod would absolutely want his own language too. Test screenings? They disagreed. Politely. By Crowe's own account, the crowd reaction to the Quan topped out at pleasant. They listened, nodded along, and then waited for the next scene. Then, the phone scene happened. "Show me the money" hit like a chair flying across a family reunion. Loud, greedy, stupid, emotional, impossible to forget. Rod screaming, Jerry screaming, nobody's being professional, and suddenly the whole theater understood the movie better than any philosophy could explain it. Years later, a friend called Crowe and told him to turn on the TV during one of Michelle Kwan's Olympic skating performances. There in the crowd was a fan holding a sign that read, "Show me the Quan." Crowe was delighted. He'd been right about the phrase. He'd just been wrong about which line it was going to stick to. Number 12. Showbiz royalty looked too much like Cruise's sister. Winona Ryder was actually the early frontrunner for Dorothy Bird, and honestly, you could see it. Look, mid-90s Ryder had the exact mix of intelligence, nervous energy, and wounded sincerity that the role needed. Then came the screen test. Standing next to Tom Cruise, the two of them read more like brother and sister than a couple. And the second an audience files a pair that way, the romance, it's dead on arrival. So the search kept going, and it turned into a mid-90s roll call. Uma Thurman, Cameron Diaz, Jennifer Lopez, Patricia Arquette, Gwyneth Paltrow, Mira Sorvino, and more. Courtney Love was in the mix too, which deserves 3 seconds of silence and 1 raised eyebrow. Connie Britton got painfully close. She tested with Cruise and then was told it was down to her and one last actress that they wanted to see. And that last actress got it. Janine Garofalo was reportedly told that she'd land the part if she lost weight, but by the time she did, it had already gone elsewhere. Then Renée Zellweger walked in. Oh, look, she wasn't a star yet. She'd recently shot a tiny horror sequel opposite another unknown, at the time, Texan, Matthew McConaughey. A movie that nobody wanted that somehow produced 2 people that would take over the late 90s. But anyways, on camera with Cruise, something clicked. A real chemistry that none of the other big names had sparked. Casting an unknown next to the biggest star alive meant that Dorothy's leap actually looked like a leap. And as we'll get used to, she knew that feeling firsthand. Number 11, the co-star that Tom Cruise had already forgotten. Now, at one point on set, Bonnie Hunt casually told Tom Cruise that they had worked together before, and he laughed it off as a bit. But she wasn't joking. Several years earlier, Hunt had appeared alongside Cruise in Rain Man. A brief scene, just a handful of lines, same leading man, and Cruise had no memory of it. To his credit, he took it well. To her credit, she did not immediately become Laurel in real life and start evaluating it. Hunt plays Laurel, Dorothy's fiercely protective, deeply skeptical sister who spends most of the film looking at Jerry like a woman who's already made her assessment and is simply waiting for the rest of the room to catch up. What most people don't know is that before acting, Hunt trained as an oncology nurse. She spent years in rooms where you learn to read people fast, you stay calm, and protect the person who needs you the most. Laurel's entire operating mode, read the room, decide fast, protect accordingly, that was muscle memory. Also, if your famous co-star forgets that you existed, that'll probably add a little seasoning too. Number 10. One question got Cuba Gooding Sr. permanently banned from set. Gooding Jr. introduced his dad to Tom Cruise, and his dad pulled Cruise into a hug and immediately asked him if he was gay, and was, just as immediately, banned from the set for the rest of the shoot. Gooding Jr. has told this story publicly with the energy of a man gently haunted by a 45-second conversation for decades. He'd expected a professional exchange between adults, but what he got was his father, completely unfiltered, aiming the most tabloid-loaded question in circulation directly at the most famous person in the building, maybe America even, at close range. And to be fair, Cuba Gooding Sr. had his own fame. He was the lead singer of a beloved R&B group. He just walked into the room and reached for the single worst icebreaker available. Cruise laughed it off and answered politely. But Cuba Gooding Jr., he didn't have that composure. He said that he nearly fainted on the spot. The film grossed $273 million worldwide. Gooding Jr. won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, and his father probably watched from home. Number 9. The end zone dance had an Olympic pedigree. Paula Abdul choreographed the end zone scene. Before American Idol, before the albums, Abdul joined the Lakers as a cheerleader at 18 and worked her way up to head choreographer. That gig got her noticed by the Jacksons, which led to Janet Jackson's Control-era choreography and helped launch Abdul's own music career. So when Jerry Maguire needed Rod's big celebration to feel authentic, funny, cocky, and a little too much, well, Abdul was exactly the person to call. She also had excellent raw material to work with. Before his acting career, Cuba Gooding Jr. was a trained breakdancer who performed at the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics closing ceremony alongside Lionel Richie. Now that's 2 American Idol judges, come to think of it. But anyways, Abdul takes a guy who already had it in his body and builds something that fuses old school touchdown swagger with hip-hop theatrics. If you watch it now, it's basically a blueprint for every viral celebration of the last 25 years. Number 8, Renée Zellweger thought the film's most famous line was a typo. Renée Zellweger read, "You had me at hello," and assumed that somebody had made a mistake. She even said this openly. She kept staring at the line, wondering if she was missing something, if there was a better way to say it, or if the sentence only made sense inside Cameron Crowe's head. But it's doing something brutally efficient. Dorothy is telling Jerry that none of his big speech was necessary, that he had her the moment he walked through the door. The master of the sales pitch gets told to stop selling. It's brutal, but so romantic at the same time. The line earned its permanent place in the record. The American Film Institute put You Had Me at Hello at number 52 on its 100 greatest movie quotes, with Show Me the Money at 25. And Jerry Maguire is only one of 3 films in history with more than one quote on that list. That's not bad for a line that its own actress first looked at like a printer error. Country singer Kenny Chesney later wrote a hit song that was inspired by it. He and Zellweger married in 2005. It only lasted 4 months, but the line had a considerably better run. Hey, quick pause. If you're enjoying this, hit like and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, are you a You Had Me at Hello person or a Show Me the Money person? You probably know who I am. But anyways, romance or financial panic, you can pick your fighter. And now, let's get back to the movie that somehow turned professional panic into a romantic comedy. Number 7, Regina King showed up pregnant and picked her own wardrobe. Regina King walked into her Jerry Maguire audition pregnant, wearing exactly what she wore through the whole pregnancy. Athletic gear, leggings tucked under the belly, not a maternity outfit in sight. The room loved it so much that they basically stopped designing Marcy Tidwell. They just kept King in what King already had on. And, well, it tracked. Marcy's married to a pro football player, pregnant, and running her husband's entire endorsement strategy from the sidelines. So, of course, the woman lives in workout clothes. She came in to read for a part and accidentally costumed it. The only snag came later, when producers decided that an NFL wife should look more glamorous and called some scenes back for reshoots. King's fix was to give Marcy a brand new wig in nearly every scene. Go back and watch it again. The hair never sits still. And that supporting wife did just fine for herself. King has been grinding since the 80s sitcom 227, and the trophies eventually caught up. 4 Emmys and an Academy Award. Here's the fitting part. She broke out playing a pregnant woman in Jerry Maguire, then won her Oscar playing the mother of a pregnant one in If Beale Street Could Talk. The woman has range. Also, apparently, a recurring assignment. Number 6, the kid's most famous line was improvised. Before Jonathan Lipnicki was cast as Ray, another child had the part first and asked to be let out of it. Cruise reportedly stayed in touch with that kid's family for years afterward, which is a quietly decent thing to do. Lipnicki came in with barely any resume, a couple of commercials, a couple months of acting, and he won the role after reading directly for Tom Cruise and Cameron Crowe. What he had was a genuine, slightly unfocused earnestness that you can't fake in an audition room. On set, he had a habit though. He'd walk up to adults completely unprompted and deliver random facts that he had just learned. The way that kids do when they've discovered that information exists and they feel personally responsible to distribute it. One day, he walked up to Cameron Crowe and announced that the human head weighs 8 pounds. Crowe liked it enough to write it straight into the movie. Oh, it's wrong, by the way, too. A real adult head runs closer to 10 or 11. Ray may be off by a couple of pounds, but he says it with the confidence of a surgeon. Crowe didn't care, because the line does something that nothing scripted ever could. It completely dismantles a man who controls every conversation he's ever been in, using a 5-year-old armed with bad anatomy. Lipnicki later did Stuart Little. He went through the rough child star to adult transition and kept working in smaller projects. Eventually, he became a serious martial artist, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. The kid with the wrong fact? He turned out just fine. Number 5, Ronnie Wood accidentally named the villain, Bob Sugar. You say it once and the name already sounds like a man who'd steal your entire client list before lunch and not feel a thing by dinner. And it came, strangely enough, from Ronnie Wood of the Rolling Stones. Now, in the summer of '93, Cameron Crowe was in Dublin with Pearl Jam, working on a story, while the Stones happened to be in town too. Late one night at a packed bar, crowd and the band ran into Wood, who looked genuinely rattled. He leaned in over the music and said that he was being followed. Some guy kept turning up wherever he went. A guy whose name was Bob Sugar. Bob Sugar. Can you believe it? Well, it took until the next day for someone to crack it. A Pearl Jam roadie realized that Wood had never said Bob Sugar. The stalker's actual name was Brown Sugar, like the Stones song. And the whole group simply misheard him over the noise and the accent. Ronnie Wood was being trailed by a man named after one of his own band singles. But the name was already loose in the room. It was too fun to let go. So when Crowe needed a villain to strip Jerry of everything in the opening act without blinking, Sugar was the first name on the page. Bob Sugar, the perfect name for a nemesis. Number 4, Cuba Gooding Jr. won the role without pants. He walked into the audition, he asked whether Rod was supposed to be naked in the scene, and then he stood up, dropped his pants, threw both hands in the air, and told him to start reading. He got it. The read called for an actor who could go toe-to-toe with Tom Cruise in a room without getting swallowed by him. Crowe needed someone with zero interest in being managed, and dropping your pants before the first line, frankly, is a complete answer to that question. It also helped that Cruise and Gooding had worked together before on A Few Good Men. so the move registered as bold instead of a call to security. Within a week, Gooding had the part. Crowe spent years researching real NFL players and sports agents, sitting in rooms with athletes who knew the exact psychological toll of waiting on a contract that didn't match what they believed that they were worth. That's the frustration that Gooding poured into Rod Tidwell. He'd heard the real version enough times that there was no faking it from the outside. There was one casting wrinkle, though. Rod had been written as much bigger than Gooding, tall enough to read as a prototypical NFL receiver. Rather than recast, Crowe did a quick rewrite and turned too short for the NFL into the central chip on Rod's shoulder, and it only deepened the character. He came in without pants, left with the role, and not long after, walked out of the Oscars with a statue. Number 3, someone wrote Jerry Maguire's mission statement before Jerry did. Crowe didn't invent the image of a man staying up too late and pouring his feelings into a memo that nukes his own career. He borrowed it from Jeffrey Katzenberg. In January 1991, Katzenberg, who was then running Disney's movie division, wrote a roughly 28-page memo about everything he thought was wrong with Hollywood. Too much spectacle, too much star power, not enough storytelling that actually meant something. Then it leaked, and overnight it became the most talked about document in town. Crowe saw it instantly. What happens when someone works too long inside a system they think rotted, then stays up well past the point of good judgment and writes down every thought before the consequences catch up? In the movie, Jerry writes a 25-page mission statement called The Things We Think and Do Not Say. Fewer clients, more humanity, less money. He prints copies by dawn, hands them out to the whole company, and then loses almost everything. Katzenberg eventually left Disney in a very public mess. And then he co-founded DreamWorks with Steven Spielberg and David Geffen and went on to produce Shrek, Ants, Prince of Egypt, tons of hits, building one of the most commercially successful animation studios in history. The memo wasn't wrong, it was just early, loud, and extremely poorly timed. Number 2, Renée Zellweger bombed the audition and got the part anyway. Zellweger read for Dorothy more than once, and one of those reads was a disaster. She'd been the standout the first time, the one that everyone wanted to see again. And then she came back wrecked, grieving her dog and unable to connect a single line. Crowe says that nobody in the room even bothered to talk about her afterward. No debate, well, let's keep her in mind, just a quiet agreement that it wasn't happening. So 6 months passed, and the casting director couldn't shake her. Not the polished reads from the bigger names, but the girl from Texas with the dog who'd come in and fallen apart. So they brought her back on a day that 2 established actresses were also reading, and Cruise was sitting in. That time, it landed. She won the role of a lifetime off the worst audition of her career. Dorothy bets everything on a long shot, and it turns out, so did the people who cast her, and they all cashed in. Number 1, the Integrity film got sued $10 million for having integrity. Yeah, Reebok sued Jerry Maguire for $10 million. A film about a man who loses everything by refusing to compromise for money got hit with an 8-figure lawsuit for refusing to compromise for money. Reebok had a product placement deal with TriStar. They supplied gear, athletes, football training, and funding toward a fictional commercial starring Cuba Gooding Jr. as Rod Tidwell. In exchange, the studio had contractually committed to one thing: a full Reebok ad starring Gooding as Tidwell, running over the closing credits as a payoff to the whole endorsement storyline. Every scene of Rod whining about not having his Reebok deal was building toward that ad. A real commercial inside a movie about a guy desperate for a real commercial. Then the theatrical cut came out, and the ad was gone. From the movie side, the logic was pretty obvious. Ending a deeply emotional story about the cost of selling out with a glossy corporate ad, that could have flattened the whole thing. From Reebok's side, the logic was also obvious. You left in the parts where our brand gets mocked, and then you cut the part where we look good, which, from their side of the table, is a coherent complaint. The timing made the sting worse. Reebok was fighting Nike and other sportswear giants for athlete credibility in the 90s. And a few years later, it would land NFL's exclusive apparel rights beginning in the 2002 season. Their whole strategy was built on exactly the kind of high-profile athlete endorsement that Jerry Maguire spent 2 hours dramatizing. Ending up as a cut scene was not the outcome that their marketing division had modeled. So they sued, and the case settled. The commercial later surfaced in the film's cable premiere and as a bonus feature on home video. A $10 million dispute turned into an extra. Rod Tidwell would have a lot to say about this. Well, there you have it, everyone. 15 weird facts about one of my favorite movies, Jerry Maguire. Which one broke your brain the most? Drop it in the comments. And show this video some love, unlike Jerry's co-workers who read one heartfelt mission statement and then hit the eject button. Oh yeah, and share it with someone who still knows every word of that mission statement monologue. Until next time, help me help you. This is Remember When.